I'm Amy Mahali from Be Well Clinic, and today I wanted to do a video talking about what if your kid doesn't like eating feeding foods. If you don't know what I mean by a feeding food, you can watch our other video that's published on this channel called Feeding Foods, Fun Foods, and Fake Foods. This video describes the difference between the quality, the nutritional density, and the bioavailability or digestibility of different foods. This goes perfect along with our series about degrees of digestibility, which is also found on this channel, and I'll link both of those in the description below. Getting back to, great, those are healthy, good, feeding, nourishing, nutrient-dense foods. My kid won't eat them. What do? I wanted to sit down and talk a little bit about what could be going on. Because most of the time, kids are not avoiding foods because they don't like them. They're avoiding them for a very legitimate reason. I do very strongly stand on the belief that everything we do is for a logical reason. Now, it doesn't mean we have to be stuck in that pattern or that we'll be stuck forever, but we do things for a reason. And so if your kids aren't liking certain foods, there's a reason for that. And let's figure out what's going on. There are 4 main categories of things I want to talk about. First would be, how is their gut flora? What's going on with the gut flora, and why does that matter about what foods they like? Number 2 is kind of a two-parter, how the food was introduced early on to them. So part A of food introduction would be their experience, how much experience they had with certain foods and textures. Part B is the emotional experience. How was food introduction for them? And we're going to talk about specific things that I mean about that in a minute. The last thing would be structure and reflexes and tongue tie. So the literal structure of their mouth. Is their mouth set up to be able to handle things? So kids who have issues with textures, for example, often actually have an issue with structure. So they might be mouth breathing, their palate might be too high, or they may have a non-integrated reflex, and that can be addressed and fixed, and suddenly they can interact with food in a very different way. So let's talk about all those things and what we can do about them. We're of course not going into as much detail as we could, but I'm going to give you a brief summary, and then you can either work with us or check out other videos on the channel to learn more to help your child further. The first one is gut flora. Gut flora actually has an incredible amount of influence in what our taste buds like and don't like, and even what foods we're craving. This can be anything. Certain bacteria, viruses, fungus, even parasites can affect our taste buds, but fungus and yeast family is actually usually the culprit. A lot of times it's a candida strain, and this is especially harmful if that candida strain is living in the mouth and has overgrown in the mouth. One of the ways you can tell is if there's a white coating to the tongue. Also, sometimes if you have constant kind of sinus nasal inflammation where you get just a little stuffy all the time, or if we have a lot of earwax in the ears, those can be indications that we have a candida yeast strain overgrown up here. If that's true, the yeast will want to eat what the yeast wants, which is sugar. Yeast is also very good at eating metals and other awful toxins, but in this case, we're going to focus on feeding or not feeding the yeast sugar. If the yeast is getting a lot of sugar, or if the yeast is overgrown, it's going to crave sugar. And it sends signals to the brain, to our craving system, to tell you, your body, to eat the foods that the yeast, wants to eat. And if you start cutting sugar, you'll actually get thoughts in your own brain that are coming from the yeast. If we don't eat that cookie, if we stop eating sugar, if we don't eat pasta anymore, we're going to die. It's not actually that we're going to die. Our bodies are actually going to be healthier, but it's that the yeast will die. The yeast will starve if you stop feeding it. So there is a very strong reaction against stopping the foods that the yeast likes to eat, because the yeast can actually send signals to your brain to tell you to eat the food so that it grows strong. So that's one example of what's happened here. It's the most common example, and you can again check your kid's tongue, see if that's an issue that's happening to them. But we can also have yeast overgrown in the small intestines, in the stomach, in the large intestines, in the body in general, that can make your blood sugar have problems. And so then you're going to have sugar cravings. You're going to crave fun foods and fake foods instead of craving feeding foods. So what do we do about it? Change the flora. It's easier said than done. It does take a long time, but you can start really quickly. So the first thing you're going to do to change your flora is eat ferments every day, and eventually every meal, and eventually anytime you have a craving. Now, this is easier for us as adults and older kids to do. It may be a little more challenging for younger children to understand what's happening, but even if you can mix it in, sure, they want something sweet. Give them some milk kefir with a little bit of honey mixed in, even enough honey to make it sweet, but they're getting the milk kefir in. It still counts. It's still going to be helpful. The things that help the most, especially with yeast overgrowth, I'm going to say quickly, and then obviously gut flora fixing is a whole topic to jump into. So there's more that you can look up or learn from us about that. But the things that I want you to focus on would be lactic acid yeast wafers from Standard Process, the Prosymbiotic probiotic from Standard Process, eating garlic, raw, fermented, and doing milk kefir or kefir. Milk kefir is made up mostly of good yeast strains, which wants to live and eat the same food that the Candida yeast strains do. So if you have enough milk kefir in your body, in your mouth, and you populate your body with it, you're not going to have too much Candida strains because they're competing for the food source and for the space to live. So that's going to be your best thing to do for flora. Now, that may be too intense if you've not been used to probiotic foods, so you could start with sauerkraut from the refrigerated section at your local health food store, right? So you can start small, work up, but those are your three best things. A couple probiotics, doing garlic, and doing milk kefir. Number 2, we're going to talk about the food introduction experience of your child. Now, there's going to be 2 parts to this. 1 is the literal food introduction, and 2 would be extra components to it, which I'll explain in a second. So, part 1, the food introduction. What did the food look like? Was it always in a puree? Was it always pieces? Was it always cooked? Was it always raw? Was the raw hard to chew, so they had a negative experience with that? Did they not get a lot of experience with a lot of different textures at the beginning, so then textures seem weird now? Those are things that we can overcome. You can practice different textures. You can start playing with food now. One of the things Dr. Natasha from the GAPS diet talks about is children who are healing their gut should actually eat with their hands until their gut is healed. And I think a large part of why this works so well is because our bodies are handling the food. We're getting the input of the feel, the flavor of the smell, right? So it's not just flavor in our mouth, but the smell of it, the sensation of it. The other recommendation I've heard, which I love, is actually to have food experiences that are not related to eating. So you're not sitting at the table saying you need to eat your food, especially in a rushed way, like hurry up, it's time to get down, everyone else is done, right? Like those are very normal in a family and in a functional structure of how the day is going. You do have to eat and then be done eating, right? That is normal. However, if you can have times where it's playtime and they are having mushed carrots or we're practicing cutting carrots, and then they're going to sneak a little piece because they're curious about it. When they're handling food, their body is actually going to become interested in exploring it with all of their senses, and that includes taste. So if you have a really tricky time introducing new foods, introduce that food as play, not as a food, and let their body get used to it before you introduce it in. The other part of food introduction is that the experience could have been too clean. You may have noticed, but I'm talking about using all of the senses. If they had a puree and a solid, and they had it cooked and they had it raw, but they didn't get to touch it, they didn't get to play with it or explore it, they're actually going to have less sensory input, meaning less connection with food, and then less motivation about eating that food. And so instead of having a clean environment, let your kids be messy. I would totally have been a clean mom if I hadn't learned all that I've learned now. But now I know how important it is. And I'm like, okay, problem solving. Let's take off their shirt. And maybe some meals you don't have time and you do feed them. But other meals you do have time, or you can do a bath right afterwards. So you can bring that in now. So even if you have been introducing foods to your child, even an older child in a too clean way, which again, I would have been totally there alongside of you doing that, you can start being messy now. Again, bring in play, let them explore. If sometimes you don't have time for that, and that's fine, but other meals you're going to have time, or you know they're going to a bath right afterwards. So figure that out, start bringing that in, and you will see them benefit from that. The other thing is not introducing them to preparing food themselves, right? We can get in the habit of cooking food and then giving it to them, but they have no connection to where that food came from. Can they help you pick it from the garden, pick it from the store, pick it from the farmer's market? Can they cut it up? Stir the pot while you are cooking things. Shake the salad bowl. It doesn't take very much for them to feel like they're helping and interacting with the food. And there is a wiring to have us do better with things we're experiencing, and that includes helping prepare the food. All right, the other side of food introduction experience would actually be the emotional experience of the child while that happened. Now, this overlaps into all the categories, actually. Because if they have bad gut flora and maybe had an upset tummy, so food hurt them when they ate it, and it took maybe a while for you to figure that out, they're going to have a negative response to food because it was negative, right? It shouldn't have been negative, but it was. If you had a lot of stress going on in your life, and maybe it was unrelated to them completely, maybe you were stressed about their health, maybe you're stressed about money or someone in your family passing. But if you had stress and stress was present while the child was eating, their very acute senses are going to pick up. Food is stressful. Mealtime is stressful. So we can do so much to undo that, and that's the beauty of our bodies. We can undo everything we did, right? And so if you're like, yeah, it was a really stressful time when I was trying to introduce food to my kid, great. Let's go back, have them experience the food, encourage them to be messy, to play with it, to eat with their hands, and make sure that you are there very consciously in a peaceful, happy, enjoying state. And maybe that means you put on silly music. Maybe that means that the stressed parent needs to just actually take a step out for a couple weeks during those mealtime introductions, and the other parent that is in a different mental place can be there. Again, we're not banishing anyone, but it's okay to give yourself a break and say, you know what, I can't be present at this meal, at least in a neutral place. I'm bringing negativity to it, and so then you can maybe give space for another parent to bring positivity. Kids don't need you to be perfect in this, right? If you explain to them, hey, mommy's been really stressed, but actually it's not about food. I'm stressed about this, and the food is great. I'm so excited you're eating. That can help them explain a lot of things that they experienced in their brain, even years after they experienced it. You also can do this with a younger child who's not speaking yet. Giving voice to your intentions and your thoughts just helps us to focus, and kids just understand a lot more than we give them credit for, right? Okay, so the emotional experience could be stressful, and we can work to reprogram that emotional experience, right? Have a corrective emotional experience that overrides the one that they had previously, which is great. The last thing, and this kind of goes into our final category, would actually be if you had nervousness about your child eating and specifically choking. This is really common for a lot of parents, moms often, but any parent can be worried about their baby choking. And if they start gagging, which is a natural response to figuring out food in your mouth, you might have overreacted to the gag and it actually freaked your child out and they became afraid of food because of a gag experience. I don't bring this up because I want anyone to feel guilty or shamed, but I do bring it up because it happens a lot. And again, it's something we can correct. It was not your fault. It is a scary experience if you've never gone through it. You don't want your child to die. You love them, right? And so, of course, you're responding strongly. And maybe, sure, it wasn't the right response, but you did the best you could out of love. And we just rewrite that. Especially if you remember a time that happened, I would talk to your child about it. There was a couple times that you choked and mom freaked out way too much. And I think that maybe made you feel a little afraid of food. But that was actually mom just not knowing what was going on. And now I know better. And actually, you're very safe to eat this food. I trust you to eat this food. I trust that you're not going to choke. And that can release something in kids to give them freedom to not be so tense and cautious. The other thing, and I said it, this emotional experience bleeds into this last, which is structure, the mouth structure itself. If you have some non-integrated reflexes, you're more likely to have problems with figuring out the gag reflex or even potentially actually choking. They may not be able to handle food well in their mouth. They don't know what to do with their tongue. Or if there's a tongue tie present, they literally can't do the right things with their tongue. There maybe is too much tension in the jaw. Maybe their palate is too high and things get stuck up there and that makes them gag or choke. So when the mouth structure is wrong, not only can that contribute to a negative emotional experience during food introduction, and now they're maybe better at it, right? They've compensated and figured it out, or they've grown stronger muscles, but we still might have issues with texture or movement of food, or even the freedom to try or eat different foods because the structure is still a struggle for them. And so in this case, if you've been wondering, my child does some mouth breathing, their palate is really high, there was that tongue tie that seemed okay, but maybe it is time to get a little deeper look at that using a professional. I've got some people that I love, so if you're close here, you can definitely contact. If you're a patient here, you can contact. Myofunctional and myofascial, and some practitioners are better than others, so you really want to kind of do your research and look into how are they shifting the structure of their mouth, what's their approach, what do they know and understand about reflex development, primitive or primary reflex development, and how that interacts with the mouth. So there's some different things there. Corrective devices can be helpful, but some are more helpful than others. So it is something to study. Again, if you're a patient of us, we can help walk you through that or send you to the people that we refer to. If you are just watching this to learn, definitely just study and do some research on your own. But correcting what the mouth is doing, the structure and shape of the mouth, is really helpful for your child. And it's really going to help them figure out food easier and be more accepting. It also is going to help with all the mouth breathing stuff, all the sleep issues, all the chronic health issues that can come with mouth breathing, including sleep apnea and high cholesterol and all of that. So it is a really big piece. And sometimes a symptom that you may kind of say, oh, this is maybe a problem, might actually be food and texture and how the child can manipulate things in their mouth. Okay, so hopefully you are getting here to the end of the video thinking, wow, there is a reason my kid is not liking foods, right? It's not about him being willful. Sometimes some parenting comes in, right? Sometimes we have to tell our kids, no, you can't play. You have to sit and eat this and try new things. But if it's a constant struggle, if it is a really big problem, there's a good chance that one or more of these things are coming into play. And working through these things should be really helpful. So I hope this is helpful to you. If you like this video, please like it. Please share it with other people you feel like would benefit from this information. If you aren't subscribed, please do so. It just helps get the word out, and we really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed this video, there are many more. So you can check out other videos on this channel, and I will see you in the next one.